I'm Corbett Wall with DB Auction, here with your feeder flash for Tuesday, June the 25th, where cash feeder prices continue to resist the board. The board continues to crater, especially on your feeder cattle futures on Monday, down hard, but your cash prices were higher. And I hate to wear this out, but I have to tell you guys, these feedlots have been feeding fat calves in the mud and the slop for the last 6-8 months. They're tired of it. Cattle didn't perform, they didn't gain anything. When you finally get the opportunity to feed a green yearling, you can't resist it. It gives you the opportunity to maybe feed your way into a profit. Yeah, these guys are betting on the come. Of course they are. The guys that were buying on that tall grass video Superior had last week, they were betting on the come. They're going to continue to do that. They want these cattle so bad that these cattle will perform for them now. And gain 5 or 6 pounds a day is very common for these green yearlings with some age to them. And they got their frame filled out. They're ready to go. They can put their head down and go to work. They're not going to back up on them. They've been eating just forage and no supplement, most of them. Anything that they go to give them, they'll love. And especially, some of those really good concentrated diets, and they will absolutely turn flips on it. But, we've got a lot of cattle out here on our big grazing areas in the Osage and the Flint Hills. Talked to some of the direct buyers there. They went out and looked at the cattle. Normally you wouldn't go look at cattle unless they were priced. But these buyers know where those guys are coming from. They're losing money on these cattle. The backgrounders have absolutely taken it in the shorts this year. And a lot of them not covering near their costs. But they've had a lot of good years over the last several, and most of those guys do not hedge. It's not near as clean to hedge on the feeder board because it's so dang volatile there. And most of the guys, they want to hit a home run or they don't want to play at all. And a lot of those guys do not hedge. They figure they'll buy those calves, those stockers as cheap as they can, get them warmed up as cheap as they can, and then get them turned out and put that cheap gain on. But it just hasn't worked this last year because this deal really fell out of bed a lot more than anybody thought, way more than I thought, and you guys know that, and I'm not denying it at all. But these guys sitting out here holding these really desirable cattle out there that are going to lose money at the current market, and the country buyers that want those cattle, they don't want to lose them to anybody else. They hate to see those guys feed them themselves. Then they'll find out how much they'll do. They'll be hard to buy ever again. And they're just kind of giving them some time. They're just letting them kind of hold the cattle, say, well, we've looked at the cattle, we kind of got an idea what they're going to weigh. We know the quality's as good as normal, and we're just going to kind of give you a little space here and see if this market doesn't come to you. Now, we talked about our technical indicators are all saying that this thing's about to turn around. It was a year ago, early this week, that your futures bottomed out. And then they kind of started coming back. They didn't spike right back, but they started coming back. We feel like we're getting towards somewhere near the bottom of this deal, but it's just hard to say. But as I say that, and as the lines on the charts tell the technical people, they don't want to be short cattle, and it is time for this thing to turn around. Your futures on your feeder cattle down nearly $2 on the rest of this year, and for 2020 feeder cattle contracts, they were all down over $2. So it's just it's hard to make any sense of, but we're bound to be getting there. We haven't put near as many cattle, placed near as many cattle on feed this spring as what people thought we were going to, especially in the northern plains. We're very current, even though we've had more cattle on feed, our inventories on feed were heavier. We're very current. Supposedly the guys in the northern plains are already well into their July cattle. And we've got some things to look forward to. It won't be long before we can see some light at the end of the tunnel. But these feeder cattle, cash prices in your sale barns, your near-term delivery on your videos, and the few that we're seeing sell in the country are well over what those cattle will pencil out. And they're pretty much ignoring the board because those guys just flat want them. We all want a pickup that we can go out and actually do something with. go anywhere and take the family with them. They cost $50,000. Yeah, it's way too high, but that's what they cost if you want one. And pretty much everybody's driving them. Let's talk about the board on Monday. June live cattle futures up 37 cents at 106.92. August up 20 cents at 102.42. Maybe it'll take a flushing of either your June or more likely your August to flush all the way back and dip down below $1. Like I said last week, the chain on the junkyard dog, reaches right out to $1 on these guys that are really wanting to speculate and go long on these cattle, your funds and things like that. They know that this thing's oversold and they're ready to dive in. If we could back it down on one of these wild movements just under $1, I think we'd have plenty of buying power come in and enough to get this thing pushed up over the hill. August feeder cattle down 190 at 131.77. September down $1.70, 132.35. Let's talk about the weighted average on last week's negotiated trade in your 5-area feeding region. 86,700 head negotiated sales, and this is 1 week, and there hasn't been very many this year so far, but this is 1 week we outdid a year ago. But you compare that 86,700 to a week ago, which was that real light movement of only 51,400. But a year ago, it was only 70,400. And this is right in there where your packers are really wanting to squash that market and get it down as far as they can. This is just about the time they do it. And sometimes it comes right back. Sometimes we waller around in here looking for an excuse to get this thing going higher. But I tell you what, no more leverage than we have right now. It's going to be hard to get higher. And I'll say one more time, start pooling your numbers, guys. If you're going to sell some cattle, negotiate it here. Find a cooperative marketing agent like Consolidated Beef Producers, your Producers of Omaha, somebody that can help you pool some cattle with your neighbors, with other people that want to be independent and they want to get some leverage on this market. These packers have not bought a lot of cattle of late for the long-term 15 to 30-day delivery. They're going to be needing some cattle as we get down further towards the end of the summer, and it'll be a good time to try to turn this market around, and you can start being part of the solution instead of the part of the problem with everybody just turning their formula numbers in every day. But let's look at the weighted average on last week's trade. On the live sales, it mostly ranged from 108 to 112, with the lion's share of them at 110. A few in Iowa, and I tell you what, Iowa's out trading everybody right now. They're being able to get a premium for their premium cattle, and good for them. But they're doing it with help from regional packers, the smaller guys that are coming in and sopping up some of them best cattle there. But they had a few sales on live up to 115 in Iowa, but they just don't sell enough to really establish it for the whole 5-area region. But your weighted average on live steers last week was 110.48, down $3.14. We knew that was coming. Your dress sales ranged mostly from 176 to 183, with the biggest part of them from 180 to 181. Your weighted average on dress steers was 180.39, down $4.09 compared to the weighted average from the previous week. Pretty tough week of trades out there. They're already thinking that we're going to have another week like that. We've seen some early, just a load here and a load there, a few deals on the very tail end of last week, even in the Southern Plains, puking them at 108. And we maybe there's a little bit of a basis there to chase, but like we've talked, we've just about run out of basis. This thing is just closing up to nearly nothing. Might be time to put your heels in the ground and try to turn this thing around. Nationwide, 103,400 head sold, negotiated. That's not bad. That's a pretty decent trade. So that goes to tell you these packers are kind of needing the cattle. They've been very aggressive with their kills, and they've been moving the meat. So there's nothing wrong with the demand for beef at all, guys. Only 25% of that 103,400 was for the 15 to 30-day delivery. So they're fairly current too on their purchases. That they're not getting a big wad of them set up for to push the market down. The contracts, like I said, continue to be a concern though. You look at the July contracts are 151% of a year ago. August is 155%, and September is already 129% of the same contract head counts from a year ago. But let's look at some of your feeder cattle markets. You look at your big sales, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma National Stockyards, 7,300 head there, and these trends can be a little bit deceiving here. Feeder steers $1 to $4 higher, spots $6 to $7 higher, feeder heifers $1 to $4 higher. If you looked, it was a confusing trend a week ago whenever the market was pretty much the opposite. It was that much lower, and spots just on the steers just like it was higher this week. It just kind of took back what it lost last week. I think your quality and condition had a lot to do with it last week. Maybe we come back with some more green type cattle this week, but we got back where they needed to be, and Oklahoma City's sitting back right about where they need to be, because for the most part the rest of your big markets were kind of unevenly steady last week. But your big sale, Joplin Regional Stockyards, 10,700 head. Mark Harmon told me they had 3 to 7 inches of rain down in that country there over the weekend. If they hadn't had that big flooding rain up there, they'd have probably had 13,000, 14,000 head of cattle there. Just a lot of cattle moving. Nobody's liked the market. They've held on to the cattle. It's time to get those yearlings off of that fescue. When it gets to the hottest, most sultry time of the year, they'll let that grow up a little bit, clip it, and then it'll be awful good grazing for late summer and fall. But awful good market in Joplin. And then don't forget, Joplin's got another big sale Thursday. You think they don't have cattle in that part of the country, guys? There's more beef calves drop the ground in southern Missouri than anywhere in the world. That's where they make them, that's where they raise them, that's where they come from. But they've got a value-added special. So they had all these green yearling cattle on Monday. They're going to have all these weanback fall-born calves coming this Thursday, 6,000 head of them. You think they don't market cattle? Then come back next Tuesday, a week from today, and they're going to have that primetime livestock video special there at Downstream Casino, and be 50,000 head next Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And those cattle won't all be local, but they are marketing them through the same outfit there. But Joplin on Monday, 10,700 head, feeder steers $2 to $7 higher. I looked at the Cattle Market Central market report. I could not argue with that a bit. On huge, heavy supplies, $2 to $7 higher. Your near-term feeder board down nearly $2. All your out fronts down in 2020 are all down over $2. So it's they're just resisting it. Feeder heifers steady to $3 higher. Your steers under $7.50. A lot of calves and some short yearlings steady to $2 higher. The heifers weighing under $7, steady to $4 lower. Just not as much demand on the heifer types. But look at this Cattle Market Central market report that shows all the cattle that went through the ring there in Joplin. And look at some of those best represented weights. Look, there was 931 head of 6-weight steers in Joplin. They averaged 646 at 140.37. This is the market on commodity cattle, guys, especially there in the southern part of your Midwest. 1,309 head of 7-weight steers, averaged 740 at 135.5. 1,580 head of 8-weight steers in Joplin. They averaged 849 at 130.44. Look at some of your heifers. 862 head of 6-weight heifers, averaged 651 at 127.64, and 1,758 head of 7-weight heifers, averaged 754 at 124.17. Talk about a stick-out sale. The biggest drag of cattle they had long strings all day long, but the biggest drag they had. You look at these cattle here. I mean, how much better do you want them, guys? Mostly all black, probably 85 or 90% black with a few smoky Charolais. Now that's as good a cattle as you get in that part of the country right there, guys. Don't see any fescue hair on them, all slicked off, and about as good a feeding type cattle you'd want this time of year as you can find anywhere. But 338 head of 857 pound steers bring $132.50 in Joplin. That's a pretty good price. That's over the index, guys, on some cattle that are well over 50 pounds above your index average weight. Talk about some other markets. Fort Smith Stockyards is back, guys. We talked about them being 4 foot underwater here just a few weeks ago. They've got that water out of there. They've cleaned things up. They've been back to having sales. Had a good sale on Monday there. As a crow flies, that's not very far from where they were selling all those cattle in Joplin, but they've got an awful good sale there at Fort Smith, Arkansas. They sold 61 head of green thin heifers, weighed 6 1/4 at $132.10, guys. That's nearly heifer price in a lot of areas. But your biggest price we saw is back up in the northern plains, where we've got back to an on-again schedule for some of those northern plains, upper Midwest type sales. Russell, Iowa had a lighter run, 1,350 head, but look at this load here, 73 head, weighed 826 pounds at $136.85. And that's your feeder flash for Tuesday.